What if I told you the next American Civil War could start in Minnesota? It sounds crazy, right? We usually think of places like Texas or California as flashpoints. But we ran a series of incredibly detailed, high-level strategic simulations, the kind used by think tanks and government agencies, and the results were shocking. Over and over again, the path to a second civil war started not with a bang in a major political center, but with a slow, grinding crisis in the land of 10,000 lakes. Let me walk you through exactly how it happens, why Minnesota is the perfect, unexpected tinderbox, and what our simulations revealed about the terrifyingly plausible road to national collapse. First, let's get one thing straight. This isn't about predicting the future. It's about understanding vulnerabilities. Our simulations are complex models. They factor in economic data, social media trends, political polarization, infrastructure, resource distribution, and even historical precedents. We feed the system a major national crisis. Think a contested presidential election, a catastrophic economic collapse, or a severe natural disaster that overwhelms the government's response. Then, we let the simulation run to see where the first cracks appear. And consistently, the system pointed to Minnesota. So why Minnesota? The answer lies in a unique combination of factors our simulation called the triple threat. The first is extreme political and cultural polarization. We're not just talking about Republican versus Democrat. In Minnesota, you have a stark divide between the deeply progressive, urban Twin Cities metro area and the very conservative, rural outstate regions. It's not just a political disagreement. It's two fundamentally different ways of life, with different values, economies, and identities packed into one state. This creates what our model calls geographical tension zones, where resentment and misunderstanding can fester. The second part of the triple threat is resource vulnerability. Minnesota is a critical agricultural hub, a breadbasket for the nation. But it's also highly dependent on supply chains for energy, technology, and other essential goods. In a national crisis where supply chains break down, the urban and rural areas would find themselves in direct competition for scarce resources. The simulation showed that cities like Minneapolis could face shortages of food, while rural areas might struggle to get fuel or medical supplies. This competition for basic survival needs quickly turns political disagreements into something far more dangerous. The final element is the presence of organized, ideologically motivated groups. Our simulation doesn't just track individuals, it tracks the influence of groups. Minnesota, like many states, has a spectrum of these groups, from far-left activists to well-armed right-wing militias. In normal times, they exist on the fringes, but during a crisis, they step into the power vacuum. The simulation showed these groups becoming de facto authorities in their local areas, providing security, distributing resources, and enforcing their own brand of justice. When a state-level government, paralyzed by the national crisis and its own internal divisions, fails to act decisively, these groups fill the void. So here's the scenario that played out most frequently in our simulations. It starts with a contested 2028 election. The results are tied up in court for weeks, and trust in the federal government plummets. Protests and counter-protests erupt nationwide. In Minnesota, the state government is split, with the governor from one party and the legislature controlled by another. They can't agree on a response. The National Guard's loyalty is questioned. Meanwhile, the economic uncertainty cripples supply chains. Gas stations in rural Minnesota start running dry. Supermarket shelves in the Twin Cities become bare. This is where the simulation gets chilling. Local groups step up. In a rural county, a local militia sets up roadblocks to protect their community's fuel and food reserves, preventing shipments from going to the cities. In response, activist groups in Minneapolis organize to liberate resources from warehouses, claiming they are being unfairly hoarded. The state government is powerless. The governor issues orders, but county sheriffs in rural areas sympathetic to their local populations, refuse to enforce them. The Minneapolis police are overwhelmed and can't control the urban unrest. We now have a situation of fractured sovereignty. There isn't one government in Minnesota anymore. There are dozens of micro-governments, each controlling a small territory and loyal only to their local constituents. This is the point of no return. The conflict is no longer about politics. It's about survival. The first shots aren't fired between the U.S. Army and a rebel force. They're fired at a roadblock over a truck full of grain, or between a neighborhood watch and a group trying to secure a pharmacy. It's messy, chaotic, and localized. The media can't even agree on what's happening. Some call it a supply chain dispute, others local unrest, while some channels begin using the term civil conflict. Once one state effectively dissolves into warring factions, the contagion spreads. Our simulation showed neighboring states like Wisconsin and the Dakotas, which have similar urban-rural divides, quickly following suit. Governors are forced to choose sides. Do they send resources to help the legitimate but powerless state government in Minnesota? Or do they support the rural counties their own voters identify with? Some states might form regional pacts, creating new alliances and further breaking up the country. At this point, the federal government faces an impossible choice. A full-scale military intervention in a U.S. state is politically unthinkable and would likely be seen as an invasion by a large portion of the population, solidifying the rebel factions. But doing nothing means watching the country disintegrate state by state. The simulation showed that any federal action, whether it was sanctions against rogue counties or a limited deployment of troops, only threw gasoline on the fire. It legitimized the local factions' claims that the federal government was a tyrannical overreach, and it drew the battle lines for a wider conflict. This is the terrifying lesson from our simulations. A modern American Civil War wouldn't look like the 1860s, with two clear armies and uniforms. It would be a mosaic war, a patchwork of localized conflicts that merge and grow until the concept of a single, unified United States ceases to have any practical meaning. It starts with a breakdown of trust, escalates with resource scarcity, and is ultimately triggered by the failure of government at all levels to manage the crisis. And it can all begin in a place you'd least expect, like Minnesota. Now, it's crucial to remember that this is a simulation, a warning, not a prophecy. The model shows us the fault lines, the vulnerabilities. It highlights how quickly political polarization can become a matter of life and death when combined with a real-world crisis. The takeaway isn't that Minnesota is doomed. The takeaway is that the social fabric in many parts of the country, not just Minnesota, is more fragile than we think. The simulation's purpose is to identify these weaknesses so we can strengthen them. How do we do that? By rebuilding trust in institutions, by fostering dialogue and understanding between urban and rural communities, instead of letting politicians and media personalities drive them further apart. It means reinforcing our critical infrastructure and supply chains so they are less vulnerable to shocks. And most importantly, it means remembering that we are all part of the same country and that the person on the other side of the political divide is not our enemy. When we forget that, we open the door to the exact kind of catastrophic failure our simulation warns us about. The model shows a path to disaster, but we are the ones who decide whether or not to walk down it. Understanding the risks is the first step in avoiding them. The fact that a civil war scenario seems so outlandish to us is in itself a source of strength. But we can't afford to be complacent. The divisions are real, and as our simulation shows, the path from a stable democracy to a chaotic failed state can be terrifyingly short. Thanks for watching this deep dive. I know it's a heavy topic, but it's an important one to think about. If you found this analysis valuable, please like the video and subscribe for more content that goes beyond the headlines. And let me know in the comments, what do you think is the biggest threat to national unity today? Stay safe and stay informed.